Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for another episode of OC Spotlight. The one show, maybe the only show that shows you the most incredible people doing the most amazing things right here in our own backyard. And today, I hope we don't lose you because we're going to go off into the future. We're going to talk about today, but we're going to get very futuristic about the state of the entire, well, let's call it the medtech community that Orange County is becoming so known for here, particularly around this university, UCI. And some of the people that have helped put it on the map and continue to put it on the map. Let's bring in our guest today here, one who's been with us before, Howard Leonhardt from Leonhardt Ventures. Let me clear my throat there. And Chip Parker, who I've never met before, is the president and CEO of LabX Ventures. Welcome, guys.
Well, thank you.
We are going to have a conversation. We're not really sure where it's going to go today because this could go on for hours here. It's about the state of medtech. It's all about how do you start things? How do you grow from ideation to exit? How do you bring these new things to reality? Let's start with Howard. You've done this trick a few bunch of times, and now you've got your own Leonhardt. Is it Leonhardt or Lionheart Ventures? I always forget.
It's Leonhardt Ventures, but our one of our startups is Lionheart Health.
There you go.
Easy to get mixed up.
That's why I get mixed up. So just real quickly, I know you developed a heart stent or something way back when in the day, and that put you on the map. And then from that, a whole bunch of other patents and ideas you developed. Give us the 60-second Howard Leonhardt, if there is a 60-second version here.
I was very lucky to be part of a team in the 1990s that developed the first aortic stent graft for repairing aortic aneurysms without surgery. It's now part of Medtronic, and it now is either the leading system of the world or right there close to being the leading system. We also developed one of the first percutaneous heart valves. Edwards here in Orange County is the world leader of that. Medtronic, who we sold our patents and technology to, they're in second place worldwide. So those are some of the early successes. And in 2001, we were part of a team that regenerated the first human heart with stem cells without surgery, which was also
to
a
basically
great
grow a heart. That still blows my mind, or at least repair it by growth alone here. All right, so and out of that you started percolating other startups. Is that the correct term? I see them sort of bubbling up in your imagination, not just your own, but others that came to you and said, hey, I got an idea. I see you did this. Can you help me with this idea? And thus was born Leonhardt Ventures. I'm going to keep screwing those two up here. Leonhardt Ventures. What does that encompass? That's an all vague sounding term. Is this stuff that you're trying to create and build, or that you're helping others create and build?
A little bit of both. In 2008, we formed Leonhardt's Launchpads, a life science incubator with a lab up in Santa Rosa, California. And in 2012 or 13, we formed CalX Stars Business Accelerator, which was a mentorship and advisory organization that would help startups get off the ground. We're partially a hybrid of what you would call a venture creation studio. So we create our own inventions and our own startups, and we enter our own creations and ventures into our own accelerator program. But we do take in some outsiders too. And one way we take in outsiders is we'll merge them into one of our venture creations, and then they become part of us. But we're talking today with Chip about making this available to a wider universe.
And a better outcome, more predictable outcomes. Because I'm told that all ventures, whether it's life sciences and med tech or just, I don't know, consumer products or any apps or whatever here, what's the failure rate for all these ideations? How many of the plants die for the couple that bloom here? Awful lot of them, I would think. And
you want to start with that one, Howard, and then I'll try.
I'll let you talk about failure.
You rattled off the numbers earlier, but I'll add some color to that. But go ahead.
It is tough as a startup to make it. Everybody knows that, and it depends what statistics you look at. I do know only 2% of American companies secure venture capital financing, professional VC financing. So if you're pursuing VC financing, you're already in the 2%. If you're
competing for that little, yeah, right.
And generally, every investor, especially the sector that I know is the life science sector.
Right.
And if you invest in 10 companies, you can expect, even if you're the best of the best, very much like baseball that you and I, Paul, adore. If you're batting 200 or 300, you're spectacular in the venture capital game in the life sciences. If you get 2 out of 10, investments that turn into a great return, you are amongst the best of the best. And just like in baseball, there probably is one in the last century that is hitting 4 out of 10. Now, Chip might change those odds.
Yeah,
Well-
we're working on it, but so let me add a little bit of color to the story here.
Yeah, please.
My background was I was a retail guy, shopping centers and franchises and things like this. And about every 2 or 3 years, some new retail thing would come along, whether it be a coffee shop or 1 hour photo or frozen yogurt. You know, they'd come along and they'd get one. California Pizza Kitchen, which started right here. So I'm a retail guy, and we're doing deals and we're growing companies. And I had just started my career, and I said, you know, boy, if I could just figure out what that next new trend was going to be, then I could, you know, hit it out of the ballpark. So I spent a couple of years just studying the world. And it's funny because we were talking about Steve Case earlier. Back in the day, this was in the 80s, you know, decade before the internet. And they had these databases, and there was CompuServe, Prodigy, and there was American Online before it was called AOL.
We're talking about the dinosaur age here.
Oh, it was, and they were very expensive. These databases were $100, $200, $300 an hour for reading and perusing, but they would offer up a class, so you could go away for the weekend and spend $350, and they would teach you how to use their databases. So you'd work all day Saturday and half day Sunday, and then on Sunday afternoon it was all you could eat, and you could have access to all these databases. So I'm reading everything. I'm going in here, and I read this white paper called ISDN, Integrated Digital Systems Network. And I'm like, God, what's this? And I'm reading through this. And that was the aha moment for me, that was the future was not brick and mortar, which is what I was looking for. It was ones and zeros.
Yeah.
So the idea with fractional compression and ISDN was that you could scan a photo, compress it, move it through the copper wire through the phone system, increase it on the other side, and then voila. So this type of technology was really the early beginnings of, you know, video text television and the beginnings of home shopping, but this was still pre-internet. So I was working very heavily to get into the technology business because I saw that this was the future. And the funny thing was everybody I talked to in the retail business, they said, oh, no one would ever buy anything using a computer. No one would ever look up a Showtime. You know, you go to the newspaper, you know.
TV Guide.
Exactly. So I said, no. You got to see what the future looks like here. So I stayed with it and ultimately moved into the internet space. And right here in Newport Beach, we started the second internet service provider in the country. And this is pre-web browser.
You say that so casually. I mean, this is back when people didn't know even what that was. And you said the company that just beat you to market was what? Netscape?
Well, that was Netscape on the browser,
Yeah.
which is a funny story because at the time, I had set up shop over here on Dove Street in Newport Beach.
Right.
And I drew on the whiteboard. I drew an ATM machine, and I drew the Apple and the point and click with the mouse. And I invited over all of these UCI students from the Computer Science Center, and I said, I want to build this thing. I think we'll call it a browser, a web browser, you know, some kind of a GUI interface, because if we can take the combination between the ATM machine and the mouse, and we can create something that would allow everybody to get on the internet, this is going to be the gateway to opening up knowledge and democratizing information. And they said, yes, we can build it. I said, okay, how are you going to do it? We have no idea, but we can build it.
How are you going to catalog everything in the world, and you're going to come up with a system to instantly search through that database? Here?
Well, here's the funny story. And Howard and I were walking in the halls of the lab here earlier, and I saw the students in there with their white lab coats on. A true story. So we're setting up, and we're an ISP in the front of the office, and we're raising capital, and I've got the team. We had like 3,000 feet. And I had the team of all these students from UCI working in the back, and their clothes were just awful. They had holes in their jeans, and they had their tie-dye shirts, and we were all coat and tie in the front of the office and trying to bring in investors. And I'm like, God, you know, it looks really good in the front of the office, but the back is kind of scrappy, and we got the rice cookers on the floor, and it was great, and they were back there doing their thing. But it wasn't quite the right image for raising capital.
No.
So I thought, well, why don't I go out and I'll buy lab coats? and I went to one of those uniform rental places, and we got these 3/4 length white lab coats, and we put the logo on the side, on
There
the
you
patch.
go.
And they loved those lab coats, and the word got out at the school, and then I had all the students coming to me saying, Mr. Parker, I'm willing to work for free. I just want a lab coat. True story.
I want to
So
look
I had
for it.
all of these students, working on the web browser, and we were getting ready to launch it out with the movie The Net, the Sandra Bullock movie over here at Edwards Theater.
Sure.
But as it turned out, Mark Andreessen was working on his version of the browser.
Then did you know? Because there was a lot of browsers. We've forgotten there were a bunch of them out there. Everybody's trying to figure out how do
Everyone's
we
trying to figure it
browse
out.
this data.
That's right. And so they beat us to market with that, and had started Netscape. And the short story was first pivot. So it was like, well, gee, I thought we were going to be a backbone provider. Then I thought we were going to be a browser company. And then it was like, well, we have to be involved in the internet. So now we'll just be, an ISP, an internet service provider. And this is really the beginning of what ties into Southern California. And the market here was, here I am. This is 1993, 94. Okay, the browser hit around 95. And I'm going
Which
around.
wasn't that long ago. I mean,
No,
in
it
terms
really
of
wasn't that long ago.
timelines, but it seems like a million years ago. It's hard for me to remember back when
Before
America Online launched and they had private, gated systems here. And if the content was in their world, you could get it. But if it was outside, you couldn't go get it or whatever here.
Oh, it was. It really was the Wild West. So we're over here, and I've got a 2-inch business plan, and I'm going around and I talk to every VC.
Is that
from
the
Santa Barbara.
proper size, a 2-inch business
Well,
plan?
back in the day, you used to weigh, business plans were by weight. So who had, if you had a 2-pound business plan, oh, you must know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. I
The
mean, this is
VCs
what
would
we-
hold it up and weigh it in their hand. Well, that one feels good.
It was something like that. And, I mean, remember, this is before we had no decks. It was business plans and then communicating and maybe some storyboards.
Right.
So I'm going around and I talk to every VC, every single one of them from Santa Barbara to San Diego. And they all said the same thing. They're like, yeah, the internet, that's just a fad, and you really are never going to make any money.
Right.
And we just don't do deals like that.
That
And-
was the thing. How do you make money off of this? Giving something away for free, basically.
Well,
Or
there was
small
a much
charge,
bigger
yeah.
picture there. And I said, well, look, come to my office. We're up, we're running, we're profitable, and I'll give you a front row seat to what I guarantee you in 1 year from now, it'll be the only deals that you're doing. Nah, we just don't really do deals like that. So I did that 1 day a week. And the other 4 days a week, we went out and built the company the old-fashioned way, which was one brick at a time, one customer at a time, and just started taking them all down. So we had the Irvine Company, and we had the Los Angeles Times, and the Register, and UCI, and I mean everything.
What
We
was
did- we
this
just-
company called? What was this?
It was called DeltaNet.
DeltaNet.
DeltaNet, and we ultimately sold it to Concentric Network, which ultimately rolled up into Verizon. But the point of this story was not the success of the sale of the company. It was the pain of the journey. Okay, the pain of the journey
Absolutely.
of meeting with the VCs that were supposed to be the early adopters, but they couldn't see it, and saying, "Look, we're up, we're running. Here's our business plan. We can scale this thing across the country. Look at everything I have in place." And we had to do something else while the venture community was getting into step, and that was build the company the old-fashioned way this country was built. Now, this country was built on two fundamental things: freedom and innovation. Freedom to think, freedom of communication, freedom of religion, freedom
Freedom of travel.
well, freedom to be able to have an idea and then do something about it.
Right.
And then that created innovation. Now, remember, we used to have one car, one hotel, one road, one gas station. And then, of course, everything grew and grew and grew. And then, of course, everything has been consolidated and rolled up now. But if you think about the fundamental fabric of innovation and community development, it all comes around freedom and innovation. And then, of course, that drives capitalization
So let's see
to
if
build a community.
let's see if we can pivot from that quick history lesson of Howard and you into today. And one of the things you took along the way is, I'm told you were part of the Tech Coast initiative here, one of the driving forces behind that, which was, as I understand it, a way to brand, to tell the story of Southern California, not just Northern California, where everybody had heard about Silicon Valley. We were still, whether it was Santa Monica and LA or San Diego or certainly Orange County, we were lost in that story. You were telling, give me some stats,
Well,
Howard.
yeah, go ahead, Howard. Yeah,
You had some stats about how much money is raised in California overall, how many companies start in California, but that didn't translate into giving us our own identity as a place to develop startups here, particularly in Orange County. But what are the overall stats for California?
I'm I live here for good reason. I love the state of California. I don't want to live anywhere else. And every once in a while, I'll get my friends in Minnesota or Florida, coming with the storyline that we're not a very productive state and we're going downhill and everything's bad here. And then
Right.
I pull out these statistics. Well, first of all, in the medical device industry, California is the #1 medical device state. More jobs, more innovation, more patents than any other state.
Wow.
Our University of California university system, more patents than any other university system in the world. Venture capital. 53% of all venture capital in the United States is invested in California companies.
Wow.
All the other states added together are 47%. The states that I've lived in my life, Florida, Utah, and Minnesota, each of them under 1% compared to 53% for California. But as an innovator, there's no state that compares with California for innovation. I did want to mention about early history. One of the reasons that the United States has excelled at innovation is that the founding fathers, right out of the gate, established that they wanted a normal average person to be able to file and get a patent. In England, that had the home of Michael Faraday and some of the great innovators of the early days, you had to basically be a wealthy person to be able to get a patent. It wasn't accessible.
I didn't
And
know
that
that.
one innovation of the founding fathers, I think, had a big place in making us the innovation capital of the world. And there's many other factors, but
I do know there was a movement in the late 1800s supposedly to close down the patent office because we've come up with everything. How many more things can there be to discover here? Well, as we discovered, a lot has happened, and we know that. Why hasn't it? And this is a two-part question. It has happened here. Orange County's, I think, #1 or #2 in ophthalmology, and you get rattle off some other industries here, med tech, med sciences, all that kind of stuff. It's well known for that, and yet, there still seems to be something missing in our ecosystem. Maybe it's the brand. Maybe it is this Tech Coast initiative that seemed to flourish for a while, but it's still not on everybody's mind. You rattle off the top 5 innovation centers, of course, Silicon Valley in Northern California, and then you can say other places, Austin, Boston, places like that. Orange County in particular, and Southern California overall, doesn't usually make the grade. And Chip was telling me an interesting thing about a Newsweek cover article that he saw a few years ago and back in the 90s here that got him mad and got him motivated to do something here.
Well, I don't know if mad was the word, but it certainly drove home the point. So, in 1997, as we were hitting it hard and heavy in the internet space, it was also clear that the cable companies and phone companies were going to ultimately dominate that space. And I told my partners, I said, we really need to reinvent ourselves. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, let's become a technology leadership organization. I said, well, what is that? And I said, well, it's just that. We're gonna lead in technology. We'll have the internet as part of it. And what we'll do is let's step out and let's create a brand. Let's create an identity for Southern California, and let's lead that effort. Because when you look at Silicon Valley was built and named by design. There was no accident. As a matter of fact, it's a funny story because Silicon Valley actually started here in Southern California. Why? Because there were more clear weather flying days off the coast of Southern California, and you had Lockheed and Boeing and McDonnell Douglas
Sure.
and all those guys, and they did all the airplane test flying. And then, of course, when the war came, the pilots all left for the war. But when they came back, then it sprung innovation, and they got their engineering degrees. And then, of course, the microchip, and of course that floated up into Silicon Valley with Fairchild Semiconductor and Intel, and that was kind of the big boom in there. But it started here and moved up there.
Because the customer base was here, aircraft and science, space and stuff.
Clear weather flying days. That was the
Wow.
reason for it. And you had the ocean, and you had the mountains, and you had the desert, all off of right down the street here in Torrance. So that was the beginning of it. Now fast forward through the internet and through the explosion of Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley's always been #1. I mean, it is because It was at the right place at the right time.
Did
with
somebody
the right
consciously
innovation.
brand that? Because I've never heard
It
the
was.
story of where that term came from.
No, it came from a gentleman by the name of Regis McKinnon. He was a marketing guy, and there was 3 leadership organizations up in the valley, and they were trying to raise more money. So he said, "Look, here's what we're going to do. You guys are each going to pony in $1 million, and we're going to call this Silicon Valley because you're all silicon-based companies." And what we're going to do is we're going to drive that brand all the way to Wall Street, and then Wall Street's going to drive capital up to Silicon Valley. You're going to grow your companies. You're going to become the giants. And then what's going to happen is your employees are then ultimately going to spin off and start competitors, which is really going to piss you off. But don't worry about that, because they're going to build great companies, and that you're going to end up buying them all up. And those companies was it was Intel and HP
And the
Apple.
PayPal mafia and all those guys here.
Well, it worked very, very well, and it was timing and innovation. However, that is changing now. Silicon Valley is no longer, it's still number 1 in the United States, but if you look at it from a global perspective, the everything is being democratized, and that came in with the internet, with information. So that was how Silicon Valley got started. And I told my partners and other people around, I said, look, we got to do something about this, because the article you were talking about was the cover of Newsweek, and it was in 1997. It was the cover, and the caption was top 50 high-tech cities in the United States, with the signpost, and the arrow was Silicon Valley, Boston, Austin, New York, Triangle, all of them.
Right.
And Southern California literally did not rank 1 through 50.
In the top 50.
Did not rank.
Wow.
And I said to everybody, I said, this is the problem. This is fundamentally the problem. So we need to create a brand. We need to get everybody together. I went up to Silicon Valley. I talked to a lot of the leadership that was up there, and it's called Joint Venture Silicon Valley. And I said, hey, I'd like to build a brand, I'd like to collaborate with you so that we can make California the center of global innovation. Now, they loved the idea, but they knew that there was a lot of infrastructure that had to come in place. So that's what I did when I exited from DeltaNet. Is I spent 3.5 years. It was partially a give back, but it was also to be able to have a community to do your next deal and your next innovation, because the whole premise is without building a strong community, you cannot build a strong economy. So you have to start with the community and then build the economy. So I hatched a 50-year plan. It is. We're 25 years into the plan. And in the first 3 years of the Tech Coast initiative, we became number 3 in the country, and we still hold between 3 and 4. So everything you hear under Tech Coast, like Tech Coast Angels and Tech Coast Funding Directory and Tech Coast Map and Calendar and Tech Coast Venture Network, those were all innovations and name changes and me going around rallying all this big change in the marketplace.
Adopt that term and that brand.
Oh, it worked. It worked really well until we hit the dot-com bubble, and then there was no market. And, that became, very difficult. Matter of fact, we were mocking up, in the newspaper, you have sports and business and Metro. We were mocking up a section with the LA Times to have a section called Tech Coast. And that was going to be all the technology articles, and then business was going to have their own
Great
section.
idea.
Because, what happened was that tech was taking over business, and they saw it as a new way of driving revenue into a new section of the paper.
Right.
And we were there. We had the mock-ups. We were days from launching that, and then, of course, the dot-com bubble, and then everything shifted. But those shifts are good because what they do, even though they're bad, they wash things out, and then the real innovators step up to the next level.
Well, we seem to be at another inflection point where things are changing. And one of the things that hasn't changed in a long time since the birth of this world of startups and incubators and accelerators and venture capitalists and all these terms I never heard of when I was a kid growing up in the 50s and 60s. One of the things that's still done the same way is they kind of stick their finger in the air and say, that one feels good. Wind's blowing in that direction. And it's a lot of, it's more art than it is science, meaning it's based on your gut. It's based on the pitch deck and the stats and the facts get your attention. But am I going to invest in you? I don't know, do I get that gut feeling? Do I believe in it? Is this something I've invested in before? Do I understand this market? All that kind of stuff isn't, I don't think, a real predictable formula, is it? For
Well,
producing
that
winners?
was the whole point of the pain that I talked about in coming through the internet space. I said, look, I think we can do a better job, and it is very subjective. So if I'm a software guy, I look at software deals, I know software, and I believe I know how to pick them because that's my domain. And you know, a lot of VCs stay within their domain. Of course, a lot of bigger firms, you know, have a cross section of domain. But it's two things. It's very subjective and it's very trend driven. You know,
Right.
whatever
That's why I say
is
put their
hot
finger
is
in
where
the
they
air,
go.
first finger, and see which way the wind's blowing. And
That's right.
based on your past experience and where
Herd
you feel comfortable.
mentality.
Herd
Yeah,
mentality.
oh, absolutely. So the theory was, and this was the theory in 1997 I came up with, and this is the beginning of this thesis of the 50-year plan, was can you build an analytic tool that can take the subjectivity out of the selection process and look at it from an empirical and scientific basis. So an entrepreneur could come in, go through a set of questions, and think of it like a Carfax or Moneyball for Ventures,
Right.
or take the Bloomberg, Carfax, and a FICO score, roll that up into an assessor model that you can come up with a mathematical predictability of success, and then use that as a roadmap. Use it as a part of your pitch. Use it to make pivots and micro pivots. And everybody said, well, that's impossible. You can't do that. You can't predict the future of venture. It's not predictable. It's not measurable. Well, at the time that was true. But if you look at evolution of the internet and you look at social behavior and changes in the democratization of knowledge and big data and stored big data, and back in the days, it was business intelligence, then it became business analytics, then it became predictive analytics. Well, look, we've known for like 20 years now that AI and ML was going to come on scene. I mean,
Machine learning for
it's
those
been
that,
around.
yeah, right.
It's been around, but now with, of course, ChatGPT, we're now in the height of what's commonly referred as the technology adoption cycle, and that's where every consumer understands this. So we built that. It started off as an R&D project, of course, and we spent like 15 years coming up with the research and the back testing and the premise, and just going through all of the evolutionary changes.
And
that you
that's
have to
what's
go through.
become Lab X Ventures.
That's right. So X stands for the unknown. We solve the unknown. So we have created an algorithm we call Rubik's, and we're bringing it all under the domain of what we now call venture science. So we're bringing science to it's a blend of science and art. Yes, there's absolutely still a lot of art to the deal, and experience and gray hair. But if you start to augment that with data and bring that together into picking deals, and it's not just about picking winners, you can share this with the entrepreneurs, and then they can see how to work on their companies, how to pivot, how to micro pivot. Are they in the right archetypes? Is the management team all executing to a single plan? And it's quite scientific. So we cracked the code on that. We built a product. We're now building partnerships like we have here with Howard and with Leonhard Ventures to look at deals together, measure them, come together, raise more capital, put the marketing in it, and bring innovation, into the marketplace.
How far
And with
is
that,
this-
I want to hand it over to Howard, who's sitting here quietly, very patiently, very nice, but who, quite frankly, has a lot more to say than I have. I'm kind of big.
How
picture
far,
on this.
Howard, do you hope to move the needle? In that you were saying 2 out of 10 might hit it out of the park or might work. How much better is this analytic tool? Do we have any idea yet or any goals in mind?
What I really want to emphasize with Chip's initiative and the initiative of LabX Ventures is that in every other aspect of what we do, science and data is the centerpiece.
Yeah.
We just released our data for our BODSTIM suit. We have a bioelectric suit that you wear it, and we're trying to prove that it will build more muscle more quickly, I've just had data come out today that people that used our suit two times a week for 12 weeks, stronger muscles, better 6-minute walk, higher quality of life, better cognition.
Which is all part of your
better mood.
med spa that you're building here.
Exactly. And all that's driven by data. It's about time that the venture industry, the financial industry, started to come aboard with science.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me.
Well, the financial industry, if you look at the capital stack and you have friends and family and credit cards and then crowd, angels, VCs, that section of the capital stack has effectively not had these type of tools because the data wasn't there.
Right.
But the rest of the financial markets, when you get into family office and public companies and growth companies, they have data, they have numbers, they have things that you can measure. But how do you measure an idea that hasn't even been hatched yet? Very difficult. Now, there is a way to do it, and we've cracked the code with it. It's a rules-based engine. It's not AI. Yes, we'll add AI to it, but the fundamental portion is that. But in trying to answer your question of the 1 out of 10 hits or 1 or 2 out of 10, let's just say it's 1 out of 10. Let's say it's 10%. 1
Right.
out of 10 is a home run, right? Let's just land on that. If we can move it to just 2, we have a
Doubled it.
100% increase in the
Right.
market.
Right.
So imagine what can happen if we can start to roll this into 3, 4, 5. Now, we're never going to hit 8, 9, 10 out of 10. That's just not going to happen. There's a lot of other factors. But I personally believe that we can double. We can do at least twice as good as we have in the last 50 years because we have evolved and we have more information. And this is another big part. When I first started this, everybody boo-hooed it. They said, "Oh, well, we would never use a tool like that, or that would replace us, or we don't have any need for that." That's old school. You don't hear that at all anymore. The younger blood, the new people coming into the market are well, of course I would use analytics. Of course I would use data because that was what they were brought up in. So we had to evolve as an industry, and I commonly will say that the venture industry is now long awaiting its own next generation of evolution or disruption.
Is that why, Howard, you've brought him in here today to talk about your proposed partnership that you're working through? I don't know what stage it's at, where you can call it here, but I saw a handshake a little while ago, so it must be moving forward some way. And the whole idea is your own startup and those you incubate for others. You got the same guessing game everybody else has had. Will this work? It seems like it should work. It's worth investigating, but how much money do we throw at it? How much money can we attract to it? And when do we say enough? This isn't going to work, and just move on? They always say in Silicon Valley, fail fast, get it over with, pull the paint off, and let's go on to the next one here. But wouldn't it be nice if we could fail less?
Well, let me put a little color on that, because you have 2 types of deals out there. You have a venture way, which is go big, go hard, go fast, kind of the venture capital way.
Right.
And then you have the visionary way. And the visionary way is a longer haul. But if you actually go back and you measure that and you put science to it, the companies that do the long haul end up becoming the sustainable companies in the market and ultimately get better returns. They don't get the quick hits like you get in venture. But if you are, I'm not a money manager, if you will. I'm a serial entrepreneur that looks through the lens of building great companies. Money managers will say, I'm going to move X number of dollars to here, and we're going to distribute those dollars, and we know statistically we can get this type of return. But if you flip the narrative and you say, I'm looking at it as an operator, as an inventor, that I care about, every deal, every dollar, every person, every employee. I mean, you think about this. For every $1 million that we lose in venture, what do you think the downtick of losses in that, in people, relationships, divorce, suicide, lack of juice? It's like, oh, gee,
Quitting.
I failed. Quitting. So the downside effect, it's not 1-to-1. I'll bet it's close to 10-to-1. And us as leaders of leaders and innovators in technology, we must do this. And it's a calling, and you do it. I mean, it's not for everybody, but we're having a lot of fun.
Well,
with
I'm
it.
glad
And,
we called you in today just to give us a sample of this, because I had no idea some of the history. That'd be fascinating just to do some more shows about how we've evolved from then to now. And this idea of branding Southern California, and I'll say Orange County in particular, awful lot of stuff happening here in a lot of very interesting areas, ophthalmology and aesthetics and all these other things we talked about, cybersecurity somewhat and everything, gaming, all these things. And yet, everybody keeps saying there's something missing in this ecosystem here. Is it the money? Is it the connection? Are we too spread out? Are we too siloed? Are we doing too many different things all at once?
Well,
I don't know.
I'll give you a little color on that as well. It is a little bit of all of those things. I mean, you need an ecosystem, you need money, you need talent, and we need to be able to share and collaborate. When you look at the Southern California Tech Coast, which is defined as Santa Barbara to San Diego, we have 128 industries of higher learning. We've got
Wow.
16 industry clusters. We've got deep water ports. We have rail. We have air. And things are pocketed. So you go down to San Diego, like San Diego, Boston was number one. Then it was San Francisco, then San Diego. That's shifting right now. Boston's still number one, but San Diego has or is moving into that number two position. And you look up here in Irvine and the clusters that are going on here, which is very different than Santa Monica, which is heavy in new media. Of course, you've got entertainment,
Right.
here as well. So we're very diversified. We're a microcosm of the global economy. So we have to think differently. We have to think as a region in those elements of collaboration, bring in more money, bring in more talent, bring in more collaboration. And that's happening. You
And
are
we got to
seeing
tell
the
this.
leaders.
Got to
of
tell the
this
story somehow.
Absolutely. And that's
I don't
part
know
of
that-
what we're going to do at LabX. We're going to tell the story. We're bringing forward an innovation tool. We're going to share it with everybody. And we're creating a new asset class called Venture Science. And we're going to build relationships like we are with Howard and these companies. And we're going to drive those numbers. And
Talk
we're gonna
about
look
your
back.
vision that students at UCI might be getting a
Oh,
special
yeah,
degree in the
yeah.
future.
Well, this is, thanks, Howard. This is actually my number one passion in this whole thing. And it's actually not even a financial or revenue model. As we build the category of venture science, we will be, and because we'll have the analytic tool, we'll be collecting data, and we're going to take all of the data and all the information, everything that we're building, and we're going to be working with the major universities to actually create a credentialed degree in venture science.
Wow.
So you'll be able to get a master's or a PhD, just like you used to be able to get a degree in computer science, and then there was data science. The future will be, your degree will be in venture science. Therefore, we have future workforce, and it brings the rails into the wild, wild west of discipline. And the nice thing about a degree in venture science, it's not boring. When you look at computer science and data science, it's ones and zeros, and it's pretty dry. But when you look at venture science, you have marketing, and you have data, and you've got people. There's all of the disciplines that fall into venture science. So that's when I'm going to say, hey, we check the box when those first students are graduating and coming off the line and into the market.
It's a real thing then.
Oh, it is.
Well,
It
I
absolutely
hope you will keep us really involved in the process and use our audience and platforms to help share that story. There's a story to be told of what's happening here in Southern California and Orange County in particular, particularly around places like this, University of California, Irvine, the Beal Applied Innovation Center. There are these hubs sprouting up. And it's only logical that we would be amongst the biggest and the best, because we have been. We just don't seem to have the branding attached to it.
Well,
here.
I know we're at the end, but I do want to say something since we're in the Beal Center. I'll never forget this, and I think about it just about every day in my career. When I started the Tech Coast Initiative, I had a list of the top 100 CEOs in Southern California, and one of them was Don Beal.
Right.
And
Chairman of Rockwell.
That's right. Chairman of the board of Rockwell. And I get my 2-3 hour meeting to sit down with Don, and I shared him my list, and he said, "Chip, you got the wrong list here." And I said, "Well, Don, what do you mean?" They go, "This is the top 100 CEOs, and here's your name right here." And what do you mean it's the wrong list? He said, "It's the wrong list." I'm like, "Okay, come on, you're pulling my leg. What's going on here?" He goes, No, it's the wrong list. He goes, "Yeah, we're all today. you have to find the list of tomorrow, and that list doesn't exist.
There you go.
But keep your eye. There's a small company in LA. It's going to move to Orange County called Broadcom. These are the kind of guys you need to find.
Broad what?
Yeah, exactly. So I will
God.
never forget that day. I thought that was some of the best counsel. And I remember sitting in his office, and he was talking about his vision for the Beal Center. And here we are.
Here we are.
It's a wonderful center, and thanks, Don, for
did this.
making that happen.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you guys for making this happen. I'm not sure I grasp all the implications of it yet, but I think if you come in and keep telling the story, we'll start to get it, and the light bulbs will go on here, because there's a lot happening here in Southern California, particularly in Orange County, particularly in Irvine, and we're right at the epicenter of it. Happy to help share these stories. How do they reach you if they want to find out more about Let's start with Leonhardt Ventures.
Leonhardt Ventures is leonhardtventures.com. LeonHardt Ventures.com. Thanks.
And if they want to learn about this new analytic tool,
Yeah,
this
well, we're LabX Ventures, so it's just like that, labxventures.com. And I'm Chip Parker, and my email is very simple. It's just first initial last name, cparker@labxventures.com. And I'm very accessible and take all my calls and emails.
remember these names, just like Don Beal threw out Broadcom. Broad what is coming here? Yeah. Remember these names of tomorrow here that you're hearing today, right here in Orange County's only community radio station. Thanks for coming in, guys.
All right. Thank you. All right.